All right, we're going to do the ecology unit now, which is kind of changing gears from the molecular biology. And in this unit, we'll be focusing on basically the whole last part of the textbook. I'm going to break that unit up into two parts, so it's kind of like ecology unit part 1 and part 2. The first unit will include chapters 45, 46, and 47. This presentation will just be on 45. So the first topic in chapter 45 is animal behavior, and that just kind of brings up that whole question of nature versus nurture. Does genetics dictate our behaviors, or does our surroundings have a better or bigger influence on behavior? The textbook talks about two examples. One is the Fisher lovebirds and their genetic basis for building nests. And they talk about the different types of nests with different lengths of material and how they hold those materials. And then the other example is garter snakes and their genetic basis for diet, depending on their location and what type of food they eat. And if they move those snakes to the different type of environment, will they change that diet preference due to location, which would be environment, or are they genetically wired to prefer a certain type of food? So the whole nature versus nurture topic, when we talk about learning, so there's a lot of vocab here, and for those of you that are taking the AP Psych class, this should be all review. So if we look at the definition of learning, is a durable change in behavior brought on by experience. The first type we'll talk about is imprinting. And this is a form of learning. They're learning by example. And then in your book it talks about imprinting with birds and how there's been some movies on that topic, right, where people have raised birds and they follow them around like they're their parents. So you can also see some other examples with children observing parents. For instance, parents that smoke will generally have kids that smoke, which is kind of a negative example, but it is an example. You can also look at posture. You see posture running in family with families that sit very round-shouldered. Big question is that genetics because they may have weaker upper back muscles, or is it a combination of genetics with that weaker upper back muscle and also seeing or observing your parents on how they sit? So it's, again, that whole nature versus nurture question. Another type of learning when we talk about classical conditioning or Pavlov's dogs, and that's where Pavlov would ring the bell and then bring them food, so dogs would associate the ringing bell with being fed, so they would start to salivate regardless whether there was food there or not when the bell would ring. And another example is apparent conditioning. And that's what most dog training is, and that is that reward. You ask the animal to do some kind of behavior, and then they're rewarded with a treat. My favorite episode of Big Bang Theory is where Sheldon tries to use apparent conditioning with Penny to lower her voice register by giving her chocolates, if you recall that episode. So when we talk about mating behavior, females tend to choose males based on survival of offspring. A female would not pick a male that would give them offspring that would be weaker or perceived as weaker and not survive. That's a lot of energy and time to devote to producing offspring that will not possibly be the best, you could say the most fit, or the be able to survive. So we see this term that we refer to as dimorphism. And what dimorphism is that we know that males and females are different in size and appearance. Females are generally a neutral color to blend in, where males are brightly colored to attract females. The males are also bigger to show strength and reproductive success. And again, the females pick a male which they feel will make their offspring also successful. So they're going to pick the biggest and the brightest, especially in birds. If you look at birds, the male, I mean, look at the male peacock is with their splendid display of feathers. And if you look at a female peacock, they are very, very plain. So we can see this dimorphism, and I think I'm going to show you some pictures here of that in just a second. So here's some pictures of that dimorphism. So you can see here this individual is the male and the female, and then up here some of the some seals, and we can see the female is much smaller than the male. This looks like an elephant seal. And then over here, here's that real pretty male peacock. There's the female, very plain. So this rather short chapter, the last main topic they're going to talk about is animal communication. So the first type of communication is going to be chemical, and we're going to talk about pheromones, and those are hormones that are secreted. One way that especially the cats will secrete their hormones and mark their territory is through their urine. So they have these scent glands that they'll literally spray, and you can see this male lion spraying his territory to let the other males know that this is his region and to steer clear, or there's going to be trouble. So again, this is an example of chemical animal communication. And the last types of animal communication include your auditory, which is sounds, and of course I think we are all familiar with sounds that animals make. And then we have visual, which is sight, and it was again mating rituals and territorial posturing. And then the last one is tactile, which is grooming, and we've seen primates groom each other, horses groom each other, even dogs and cats will groom each other. The book will talk about the dancing bee waggle. Be sure you read on that. It has to do with communicating, doing this kind of body waggle and turning in different directions, and they're communicating with the hive where food is located. It's really kind of interesting. So be sure you read up on that in that chapter. It goes into quite a bit of depth in the book. All right, so that ends the information for chapter 45. Again, it's short and sweet. Make sure you take plenty of notes, because remember, this will be an open book, open note test. So even though it's short, make sure you know where everything is located, so when you read the question, you have a good idea where to find it, or possibly already know the answer yourself. All right, I will continue with chapter 46, hopefully soon.